Good evening. My name is Amanda McMullen. I am the president and CEO here at the New Bedford Whaling Museum. And it is a delight to welcome you to this evening to celebrate John Bullard. Let's give a round of applause. So, there you are, John. You know there's nothing museums love more than a primary source. So this is a gift to the community for sure. And what an absolutely epic tale, John, that you've crafted for all of us. As a young man, John, you wrote in Hometown that you were set on escape from New Bedford and to try to detangle from some ivy roots, right? But as you moved through college and into a life of public service, you remained committed to change. And we are without a doubt all the better that your drive to save the world actually led you back to your hometown of New Bedford. After winning in his second bid for mayor, John notes in Hometown, "My opponents had tried very hard to paint me as an outsider, despite the 7 generations that my family had been here. By winning, the voters said I belonged. To earn the trust of people in every nook and cranny of New Bedford was both exhilarating and humbling. I realized I would have to work very hard to measure up and keep that trust. John, since the day you committed to our community, you have never stopped working hard to keep our trust and indeed measure up." I know that I speak for this overflowing crowd here tonight when I say thank you for your decades of service. So before I turn it over to Joe Thomas, who's going to share a few of his thoughts, I wanted to end on a personal note. I've been in this role at the Whaling Museum now for 5 years, and really almost without fail, following a program, an exhibit opening, a lecture, without fail, I will come in the next morning to either an email or a voicemail from John Bullard. Without fail. And at first I had to get used to this because I don't know, John, if it's just my inbox, but your sender with your name comes in as all capital letters, John Bullard. And it's almost like the way John sort of announces his presence and calls for command in a room. Your email gets in my inbox and I'm like, I stand up a lot straighter when I get those emails. And I have to admit, when I first started in this role, when I first got these emails, I was like, oh God, what did I do? That was always my first reaction. But what I came to realize very quickly is that every single note, every single call, and every single voicemail, John conveys a sense of pride in this city, in this place, and a deep sense of love for his hometown, but also unwavering kindness. That's what comes through. And in John's notes, even on topics that we might not always agree on, and there's a couple, we have a few, he always pays respect to the museum, our role, and our work. And importantly, he always takes that time to thank me, to compliment me, and to encourage me. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate that, John. Thank you. So John, thank you for your grace and continued encouragement of the next generation who is going to do the good work of New Bedford, and congratulations on this outstanding publication. Now, I am pleased to introduce Joe Thomas, the co-founder of Spinner Publications, which began in 1980. Thomas serves as publisher and executive director of the organization and has overseen the production of more than 50 books, numerous works that document the history and culture of southeastern Massachusetts. Thomas is also co-author and editor of 37 books and serves as editor and designer of nearly all books and calendars. A native of New Bedford and lifelong resident, he is also a graduate of the Art Institute of Boston. Importantly, in 1997, the Massachusetts Cultural Council awarded Thomas the Commonwealth Award, the state's highest cultural achievement award, in the humanities category for dedication to excellence in illuminating and celebrating the heritage of southeastern Massachusetts through a series of high-quality books and publications. Please welcome Joe Thomas.
Thank you, Amanda. So it's good to see everybody here today. I see a lot of people that I saw in the book, that I worked on pictures of you in the book, and I see a lot of people whose names appear in the book. So I feel like I know half the people in this crowd here, even though we've never met. So John asked me to give you a few minutes, and I'll do that. I did write some notes. I don't usually prepare notes, but I did this time. I usually ad-lib my way through everything. So I'm going to read to you what I wrote, and really about John, not much about John, but a little bit about John, and a little bit about how we get to be where we are. So, first of all, I want to explain this whole thing where you received a softcover advanced copy of the book instead of the hardcover that you paid for. I think that's important to talk about. And I'll just give you a little background. In 40 years of doing this, publishing, and more than 50 books, we've never not had a book launch where we didn't have the book. This is the first for that, or it could have been. It wasn't, it turns out. So when we were informed by our printer that they had been taken over by a conglomerate, and that the company founder and longtime owner was chased out and being sued, that's when we started to worry. So working with book printers often means working with large multinational corporations with printing and binding divisions throughout the continent. This is what it's come to. They complain about tariffs, supply chain issues, etc., and often disregard deadlines. Still, new management assured us everything would be on schedule, proofs would be delivered as promised, but they forgot to pass that memo along to the people in production, who were knee-deep in yearbook productions, which was the bread and butter of this organization, of this printer that we use. Eventually, we learned that due to delays in binding, they would not have the hardcover completed in time. It was a gut punch, but we did not want to let people down. So we called another printer in Chelmsford, Massachusetts, that we've worked with, and they were able to commit to printing several hundred softcover books specifically for this event. So that was good. But here's the good news on top of that. Those of you who ordered and paid for the hardcover book will get two very special books. The paper edition, which is not for sale anywhere and won't be, and a signed and personalized hardcover that will be shipped to you at no cost before the end of the month. And that was John's idea. He says, you can't let these people go without a book. And he's right. He says, I got people coming from all over the country. So he was right. And then, you're here, and we're grateful. So I'll tell you a little bit about Spinner and my interaction with John. My association with John Bullard goes back to 1980, when I teamed up with Professor Donna Hughes of UMass Dartmouth to produce a richly illustrated book of oral histories and stories about people and culture in southeastern Massachusetts. We had tentatively titled the book Spinner. We chose that name because it had both a textile and maritime connotation, and it personified a spinner of tales, which we hope to be. Donna knew about John and his work at Whale, and hoped he would have ideas about how to get support for a publication. I knew nothing about fundraising, very little about the history of New Bedford, in fact, and absolutely nothing about publishing. All I had was a box of photographs I had taken and some story ideas, so there I was in John Bullard's office with a box of photographs. Yet, There I was, eager to meet this man Donna spoke so highly of, and excited to begin the process of creating community history. Well, John loved what we were doing. He looked it over carefully, and as a board member of the Crapo Foundation, he agreed to bring it before the board for grant support consideration. So this was the beginning of my relationship with the history of New Bedford. I really knew nothing about Whale, and as a former cab driver during my student days at the local college, the only thing I knew about Roach, Crapo, and Bullard was that they were streets in 3 different parts of the city. Bullard Street way at the north end, Roach Street in the west end. So, well, the names rang true. As it turned out, we got the Crapo grant. We also got matching funds from the Polaroid Foundation, the SMU Foundation, and we got a lot of support from local businesses that bought sponsorship pages in the book. So Spinner One really was a community project, and we did get a lot of support. But I always go back to John, that he was so instrumental in our getting started and really getting the thing in print. Now, yeah, definitely. So, fast forward 40 years to 2021, and who should visit our William Street office but Citizen John Bullard, distinguished native son and erstwhile mayor of New Bedford. It was a pleasure to see his smiling face for a little while, anyway. John told me about his book and left me with a good chunk of the manuscript to check out. As I began reading it, I guess I was a little surprised. It was well organized, it moved quickly. I don't know why I was surprised, but I was. It was adventurous, sincere, and not without humility. And it is a significant document on the history of New Bedford and the South Coast region. It's an important contribution to local history and culture. This book's important. Let's not varnish it any other way. This is an important document to our local history. In my lifetime, I can think of no one who has had a greater impact on the city's development, who cares more about its destiny and the future of its people than John K. Bullard. There's no doubt. And for those reasons, I'm honored to be a part of this timeless historical document. Okay, in closing, I gotta move on. I'd like to stay and talk more. I just want to thank the Spinner staff, Jay Avila, Susan Grace, Zachary White, Corey Newfer, and in particular, for this project, Natalie White, our editor extraordinaire, who did an unbelievable job working with John day in and day out, and myself. A great job for Natalie. Thank you. Folks. Okay, that's it. I'm off. So, and now a message from Mayor John Mitchell.
Hi everyone, I hope you're having a good time at the reception tonight. I wish I could be there with you, but unfortunately I had a prior commitment out of town on behalf of the city. But I did want to weigh in on the book that you are about to start enjoying, Hometown, and its author, my friend, John Bullard. Now, I'll just say it right up front. Put this book on your summer reading list. It is worth your time. I will hasten to add that this being John Bullard, he has a lot to say, an awful lot to say, so this book is entirely too big to bring to the beach. But all that said, wherever you read it, you will enjoy it and you will learn something, and I suspect a whole lot, as I did. There are many reasons to read this book, and there are many reasons why I think over time it will be recognized as a really important work. So the first off is that it establishes a really fascinating and much needed historical record. So John has contributed without interruption, barely an interruption, to the city for over the last half century. Started off as a really young guy and is continuing to do it today in a very important way, especially with the New Bedford Ocean Cluster, among other things. But he has a whole lot to say about his work coming out of college in the early 70s around historic preservation and other important causes, and his work with the Markey administration and so many others, other groups, preservation groups and others in the city, is something that everybody who cares about New Bedford needs to know. And then leading right up through the 80s and beyond, it is in many ways an important historical work of history, of local history, that fills in a whole lot of gaps. And so if you are, like me, a history buff, and in particular a history buff of New Bedford's history, then this is certainly for you. It was also an important work commemorating or memorializing his time as mayor and offering a window into what it's like to be mayor of a city that is really has had to pull itself up by its own bootstraps over the many decades since its decline in the 1920s. We have New Bedford is a special place, and in many ways, this book is a love letter from a mayor to his city. And this book will give you, Hometown will give you some insight into what it's like to be mayor during a time of uncertainty, a time of a great deal of activity. In John's case, he set foot into office, was sworn in the midst of the unraveling of a number of the unions on the waterfront, the Seafarers Union in particular, at a time when things were contracting in the fishing industry, and there was a whole lot of uncertainty and a whole lot of people saying, well, what's next for us, as well as a time when the manufacturing base of the city was really starting to come apart. You'll get a sense of the days of what a day in the mayor's life is like, and I think that's just so important for folks to understand. For me, in particular, I took away some kernels of insight that hadn't occurred to me in my time in office, and so for me, it's actually in some ways a useful instruction manual. But it brings you back to a time, for those of us who were around then, and I was in high school at the time, a time of transition for the city, and a time when the mayor had to make some really hard choices, in particular around the location, the siting of the city's secondary wastewater treatment plant, something that no mayor would care to have to take on, and how those decisions are made and how they played out electorally for John is something that I think that folks in the city need to know. We tend to look around at the city and sometimes just assume that it was always the way it is, and because that's just sort of very tempting. But behind every major project, behind every development, there's a long story, and in the case of the treatment plant, a very contentious political story that played out in a very big way, and ultimately at the ballot box. It is a tale of political courage on his part to see through a project that for which there was no huge political upside. It is. But we do, in the long run, we have benefited from having a treatment plant that serves our residents well. Every single one of them, everybody uses it, everybody benefits from it, and our waters are cleaner as a result, and the system works better, more predictably as a result of the work that John did. So getting to that point was no mean feat, and it's worth everybody paying close attention to if you care about municipal politics. The last thing I'll just say is that as John is somebody who has served really right from the get-go, from the time he graduated from college right up to the present day, it is really an invitation to young people to commit themselves in the service of others. Public service, in some ways, almost sounds so trite. It sounds like something that folks do when they can't, at least in some quarters, that folks do when they can't find other work. The lure of money, which is so tempting for, especially polls show, for younger folks today, I think sometimes obscures the opportunity for fulfillment that public service offers. And frankly, as somebody like John who came back and committed myself to the city, it certainly resonated with me. But having it there all together, laid out story after entertaining story about service and about how the little things along the way can lead to fulfillment, I think will serve as encouragement, an invitation and encouragement for younger folks to take the plunge. Public service is a way a way toward meeting, a way for folks to say, to feel like they're part of something else, to live a life that is in fact richer than what money can buy. And John has demonstrated that lovingly in these pages, and in a way that, against the backdrop of a very special place, New Bedford, Massachusetts, a place that he loves and I suspect everybody who's watching this loves as well. And to me, there's so much to admire about John's career, a half century of public service, and about the way that he's gone about it. He has not only shown courage, but he has put himself out there. It's one thing to be showing courage in a reactive way, being the person where the buck stops. But John has actually done more than that, in the sense that he's taken on professional risk one after another proactively over the course of his career, and there's a lot to admire about that. And I'm so thrilled that he took the time to lay it out in very clear detail, but also in an entertaining way that I think everybody can embrace. So John, thank you for your contributions all along the way, including this latest contribution, Hometown, which will, I think, stand the test of time as a testament to public service and to this great city.
Very nice to hear from Mayor Mitchell. And now the moment you have all been waiting for. It's an absolute honor to welcome to the microphone Mr. John Bullard.
Wow, thank you all very much for coming out tonight. I really appreciate this turnout. It's incredibly moving. Hometown is about my journey, and it's about New Bedford, but it is also about family. Before I get to some thank yous and why I wrote the book, I want to introduce my family to you. And I think they're all over here, so I'm going to be looking. I think everyone here knows my wife, Lori. Yes. Except I haven't a clue where she is. Is she over here? She's way in the back. All right. There are a lot of stories in this book, as you, I think, gathered. And Lori has heard them all. At parties or other events, Lori has a nice way of going like this. As I start to say the same story 2 or 3 times. Our daughter, Lexi, is going to be here at some point. She's stuck in the Mass Pike with our grandchild, Caroline from Pittsfield. Toby is here also, I think, in the way back with Maddie, and son Wyatt is preparing for the playoffs at BC High baseball, so we wish him luck. They're from Cohasset, and all the way from Boise, Idaho is Matthew with his kids, Oliver and Bibi. Where's Matthew? Also? Oh, right here. There's Bibi and Oliver. Jody has to work, so she can't join us, but we miss her. Brother Peter, I think, is here. Is Peter here? He's also in the back. My brother sometimes introduces himself as my son, but we're not fooled. And my sister Ann is with him, and her husband Lark coming down from West Newbury, and I appreciate that. But our family long distance award goes to our nephew, Peter McNall on Lori's side, and of the family, who came with his wife, Julia. Where is Peter? Right there. And we've climbed some mountains together, PJ, but this is a really long hike. And out of town hikers include Warren and Donna Elliott, who came from Philadelphia. Are they here? Is Warren here? Said he was coming. I appreciate it. And Dick Aldrich, who I've known for...
I'm sorry. I'm interrupting. I forgot to mention Toby's wife. Okay.
Oh, Jen. Toby's wife, Jen, is here. Sorry. Thank you for the correction. Jen. Can't read my own writing. And my childhood buddy, Dick Aldrich, came up from New York. Thank you, Dick, for driving all the way up. Appreciate that. Now, I have, and Bob Hildreth is here, drove down from Rockport, who is one of the saviors of the Ernestina. Bob, I really appreciate your coming down. There he is back there, smiling. Thank you, Bob, coming down, and thanks for everything you do on Ernestina. There go all the profits. Thank you, Amanda, for your introduction, and to the Whaling Museum for hosting the reception. It's very fitting to be here. To Beatrix Oliveira for organizing it, to party with Primo for the food and beverage. This story starts right where we are standing. It is here where my ancestor Joseph Roach purchased land in 1765 to bring his whaling business from Nantucket to this harbor. It was too crowded and developed over in Fairhaven, so moved over here to the rural countryside on this side and bought 10 acres. Further up the hill in 1903, another ancestor, William W. Crapo, became the first board chair of this museum. Now Tony Sapienza very capably chairs the board, and I think he is with us tonight. Is Tony here? Okay. In 1963, the curator of this museum, Philip Purrington, helped me with an assignment I had in high school to write a paper on the Great Stone Fleet. And so he took me downstairs and said, here are the logbooks from the vessels that were bought by the whaling vessels bought by the federal government under Abraham Lincoln to blockade Savannah and Charleston. And I looked at them, I opened them up, blew the dust, and tried to understand the writing of these books that hadn't been opened since the Civil War. And to read the writing of those captains of that fleet. And for me, it was entering a time machine of, and feeling the excitement of original research in history. And for a young high school student to be in the library of this museum and be excited about that ability, what a privilege that was. And I didn't become a historian, and real historians can be thankful for that, but it did really teach me the value of this institution and the excitement that takes place when you have a resource such as this museum. And it was a former president of this institution that first suggested to me that I write a book, which had never occurred to me at all. And then others like Ken Hartnett reinforced that, and so that set me on this path. To Mayor Mitchell, I'm thankful for his kind words given via video, although I don't see why you can't read this book on a beach. I mean, it's windy here, and you need heavy books to keep the towels down from blowing away. I think this is a very good beach book. I would buy 2 of them, maybe 3. You know, I disagree with the mayor on that. To Joe Thomas and his dedicated team at Spinner, thank you from the bottom of my heart, and thank you, Joe, for your kind words. Spinner, under Joe's vision and leadership, has been publishing local history books relevant to our region for well over a generation. Yes, he deserves applause. All of us interested in the preservation of the history of our area owe Joe and his team profound thanks. This is my first book, and I never knew what went into the making of a book. It took me 3 years to write, and sometimes it seems like that was the easy part. Then there was another 2 years of editing, illustrating, and production. There are a number of editors, but 3 stand out. Early on, I benefited from a longtime friend, author and editor Clara Stites. Yes, Clara worked on the text at its early stages when course corrections had the most impact because the concrete hadn't set yet. Later on, Natalie White, is Natalie here? Yes. Where is Natalie? There's Natalie. Hello, Natalie. Natalie went over every phrase, every word, every letter of every word, to make sure everything was just right. I knew Natalie from when she covered City Hall for the Standard Times, so we had a good relationship. Her standard of excellence is rigorous, to say the least, and so I am deeply in her debt. But any errors are mine, not hers. And so that's who you blame, me. And Lori is also a great editor. Without her, I assure you, this book would be 1,000 pages long. And you know that. So you owe her many, many thanks. Peter Rio's laughing because he knows me better than practically anybody else. I received invaluable guidance from real writers early on. My friend, neighbor, and guide through life, Ken Hartnett, who's sitting right here. Yes. He advised me that there were 2 characters in the book, myself and the city of New Bedford, and I would have to develop each character. He stressed I would have to tell people how I felt about things. I explained to Ken that as a New England male, I was brought up not to have feelings. And that if I did have any, I sure as hell wasn't going to share them with anyone. He said, John, you don't have to go full frontal or anything, but you need to tell people how you feel. Well, you'll have to judge how well I did about that when you read the book. The suspense is killing. Huh? More reason to buy the book. Other real writers also gave me encouragement. High school classmate Tim Phelps. Is Tim here? No. Tim is over there. Another real writer confirmed Ken's advice about the 2 characters. And so I appreciate that, Tim. Hold on here. John Spooner thought there was merit in the book and shortened the title from Hometown Stories to what it is now. Everett Hoagland, is Everett around? Present. Everett in the house. Everett Hoagland suggested I be more upfront about privilege, which is advice I took to heart. Thank you, Everett, for that advice. David Abel, Nat Philbrick, and Eric Dolan all read early manuscripts and gave me early encouragement, which was so important during the long process, which could get discouraging at times. I'm very grateful to these titans for their belief in me. Especially, I thank Lori, our children Lexi, Toby, and Matthew, Toby's wife Jen, Matthew's wife Jody, and our grandchildren Maddie, Wyatt, Caroline, Oliver, and Bibi. I have put a lot of effort into this book, and that has caused me to be a bit distracted over the past 5 years. I thank them for their understanding and support during this time. This book is about one person's journey to save the world by fixing up his hometown. But why save the world if not to make it a better place for your children and grandchildren to live in? I thank them for that as well. I wrote this book for additional and equally important reasons. One is history, and it is important that we are here in this museum. I didn't like my grandfather much, but he wrote books and put stuff down on paper for future generations to read and learn. I respect him for that. I have been involved in many things, a number of them successful, like the very district we're gathered in, or the Zeitarian, the RJD, or the Ernestina Morrissey. All of these efforts required the involvement of many, many people. I did not want their stories lost to time. Is John Markey here, young John Markey? He was going to be here. So Mayor Markey, whose dad, Mayor Markey did so much for our city and for the district, and I see people like Peter Rio or Tenny Lance and others. I don't want, and they did so much to save this district. I don't want their stories lost, what they did. I just don't want their stories lost. That is one of the main reasons I wrote this book, so their stories would never, ever be lost. I wouldn't have been elected mayor without Scott Lang, Walter Ramus, my brother. I see Jerry Messier right here, and many others in this room. I want their stories told as well. I was fortunate to learn about leadership from some amazing people. Sarah Delano, the slight elderly lady from Westport, with more wisdom, vision, courage, and generosity than all the male business leaders of New Bedford put together. Taught me a master class in leadership while I worked in this district. I don't want anyone to forget this incredible woman. When I was mayor, I had so many people who guided me in a job that was both wonderful and immensely challenging. Ben Baker started mentoring me when I entered graduate school and kept right on doing it as I navigated City Hall. Another mentor who took my book smarts and taught me graduate courses in street smarts led the city next door. I'm looking at you, Carlton. Carl Viveros was one of the nation's best mayors, and I was lucky enough that he took an interest in me. He epitomizes my book. When he retired, they threw him a huge party in Boston. There were well over 1,000 people in attendance. The governor, ex-governors, the federal delegation, most of the state house, and all of his fellow mayors. The entire city of Fall River went dark that night. They were all in Boston in Copley Square. The speeches lauding Carl's leadership went on, and when it finally came time for Carlton to speak, I can only remember the last line from this great but humble man. I come from Fall River. He wrote my book in one sentence. I wrote this book so these stories would be told, and these people, who of course make up our city and our region, will be remembered. Over the course of my career, I've been fortunate to work with many young, idealistic people. And sometimes they'll ask me a question similar to the question I asked myself at their age. It takes several forms, but it is basically the same question. How do I make a difference? How can my life serve a purpose? How do I find happiness? There's not one right answer to this important question. There are thousands. I wrote this book because I think perhaps the journey I have taken provides one of those right answers. It is natural that at that young age to want to save the world, but it can be intimidating unless you are Gandhi, Martin Luther King, or Greta Thunberg. But picking off a piece of it and focusing on that, knowing that there are others doing the same thing, can have an impact that is effective, fulfilling, and joyful. I hope you have as much fun reading Hometown as I had writing it. New Bedford is certainly worth celebrating. Thank you all for being here. This evening means so much to me and our family. And let me end with just a short reading from Hometown. It takes place when I was 30 and working as agent for Whale, for the Whaling Museum, and for the businesses in the district. It was Tuesday, January 18th, 1977. A little before 5 a.m., the phone rang. It was Mayor Jack Markey. John, you better get down here right away. Your building on Union Street has blown up. The winter had been bitterly cold. Snow and ice covered the streets, sidewalks, and yards. As I hurried the few blocks from our house down to the district, I could see an orange glow in the sky. Nothing could have prepared me for what I saw when I got there. The mayor was already there. A ladder truck was parked in front of Union Tobacco. A pumper was in front of the Sundial building. The huge Palladian windows in the Whaling Museum at the top of the hill were blown out. There were flames everywhere. The combination of fire and ice in the darkness was surreal. Our Macomber Sylvia building on Union Street was gone. It had been an 1820s wood frame building modified in the 1870s with a Victorian gable on the front. Vacant for many years, it had been in terrible shape but formed a beautiful three-building assemblage facing Union Street with a 3.5-story O'Malley's Tavern in the middle and the stately brick sundial building on the corner. Except for O'Malley's Tavern, every other space had been vacant and in need of major work. Whale purchased the Macomber-Sylvia building to do just that. Anne, Pete Baker, from Westport, knew how to tackle historic wooden buildings. She was also a very talented potter and a very good friend of Sarah Delano's. Her small crew included Doug Keffer from Vermont, who knew his way around historic wooden buildings. There is an old joke that says one way to draw an elephant is to cover a piece of paper with gray from a pencil and then just erase what doesn't look like an elephant. Similarly, Pete and Doug began erasing what didn't look like the original 1820 building or its Victorian modification. When they got down to the roots, we would see the structural beauty. We scoured old photographs for the missing pieces, what the missing pieces might have looked like, and Doug and Pete filled in those pieces. Our goal was to meet the modern building code and restore the exterior. This they had done, completing work on January 14th, 1977, a Friday. The building had been transformed. It was beautiful. Whale had spent $41,000 on the work, emptying its account. While Pete and Doug were busy with the restoration, I was trying to find a buyer for the property. I found two prospective developers, each willing to buy the building, finish the interior work, and use the building in a way that would benefit the district. Whale was set to decide which buyer to select at its regularly scheduled board meeting at noon, January 18th, 1977, at the Wamsutta Club. Because of the quick turnaround between finishing the project and selling the building, Whale decided not to increase the insurance on the building to cover their investment. The noon building did not go off as planned. Whale did not sell the building because there was no building to sell. We couldn't even find a few pieces of it. Pete and Doug's handiwork and 150 years of history were blown to smithereens. As I said, it had been a freezing winter. The frost had driven deep into the ground. Although the gas company had replaced many gas lines, it had not replaced a 19-inch diameter feeder line that went over Johnny Cake Hill and across Union Street. Where the gas line made that bend from downhill to level, the pipe got close enough to the surface to be above that year's unusually low frost line. A weld in the cast iron feeder pipe cracked. Gas started to leak to the surface. But instead of dissipating into the air where eventually it could have been noticed, it was blocked by the ice that covered everything. The gas had no choice. It migrated under the surface until it found Mr. O'Malley's Tavern and perhaps the Macomber-Sylvia building. The gas seeped into the tavern until 4:43 a.m. when the furnace kicked on. And that was the end of Mr. O'Malley's building and Whale's building. Fortunately, nobody was inside either one. Things got scarier still as we were trying to grasp what we had lost and how it had happened. Union Tobacco was a one-story concrete and brick building on the northwest corner of Union Street and Johnny Cake Hill. It was built sometime after World War II. Like several nearby buildings, it was used to sell food and tobacco products befitting a seaport. The ladder truck had pulled up in front of it to fight the fire raging on the next block. Suddenly, Union Tobacco also blew up, slamming a 4-foot-high I-beam, 20 feet in length, into the ladder truck. The blast had enough force to suck the north wall of the brick YMCA across the street 7 inches towards the explosion. We were extremely lucky that no firefighters or bystanders were in the way of the I-beam, but another building had been lost as well as a valuable piece of firefighting equipment. We realized danger wasn't over. The gas was moving. What was going to blow up next? We didn't have long to wait. At 7:08 a.m., the Eggers building blew up on the other side of the Whaling Museum. It was a tidy 2.5-story wood frame building next to the massive brick museum auditorium annex. It had a gable front and a Greek Revival detailing. Once a bookie joint with hundreds of telephone lines coming out of the roof, it was now home to Kroll's Fine Art Gallery on the first floor and Tim Sylvia's commercial photography studio upstairs. The explosion lifted the roof into the air, blew out the gable front and back, and the roof settled back onto the first floor, making it flat as a pancake. The Whaling Museum officials had begun examining the damage. I went in with Richard Kugler. Inside the museum's Bourne building, all the windows had been blown out, and the sails on the half-scale ship Lagoda were filling with wind. It looked as if it were straining from her permanent berth in the floor to escape the carnage, which didn't seem like a bad idea. More worrisome was the report that the gas was filling the Hearst building, which housed the museum's library. The implications were clear and ominous. The entire museum was at stake. Richard Kugler reported this to the authorities. They succeeded in shutting off the gas, venting the building, and avoiding another catastrophe. Well, to see how this all turns out, did the museum survive? You'll have to buy the book. Thank you all very much, and I'll sign books over here.